The marble floors of the Vance Enterprises head office reflected my reflection as I walked into the boardroom. I fixed my tie, holding my head high. I knew every eye in the building was on me, including those belonging to my adopted brother, Julian. He sat at the far end of the long oak table, wearing a polished smile that did not reach his eyes. "Welcome back, Ethan," Julian said, standing up and opening his arms wide. "We were beginning to think you'd never return from your leave. I had to make sure the new tech venture was completely secure before stepping foot back here, Julian," I replied, sitting down across from him. "You know how much is riding on these master decryption keys." "Of course," Julian smiled, though his jaw tightened for a fraction of a second. "Only the best for the Vance legacy. He wanted me dead or at least broke. I knew it and he knew I knew it. But Julian was too cowardly to do his own dirty work. That was where Chloe Bennett came in. That evening, I sat in my private office overlooking the city skyline. The door opened and Chloe walked in carrying a folder and 2 cups of coffee. She was breathtaking, tall, elegant, with eyes that seemed to pour endless sympathy into mine. She had been assigned as my personal assistant 3 months ago, but over the last month she had worked her way into my personal life. "You're working too late again, Ethan," she said softly, setting a cup down on my desk. "I have to, Chloe," I sighed, rubbing my temples. "Julian is pressing the board for a status update on the encryption project." She walked behind my chair and placed her soft hands on my shoulders, massaging the tension away. "Forget about Julian for tonight. You've done enough. Let me take care of you." "I don't know what I'd do without you these days," I murmured, leaning back into her touch. "You'll never have to find out," she whispered into my ear. I closed my eyes, pretending to give in to the exhaustion. But in the reflection of my darkened computer screen, I watched her every move. The moment I pretended to drop off into a light sleep, Chloe acted. She reached into her purse, pulled out an encrypted flash drive, and plugged it into my private laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, copying the master decryption keys directly onto her drive. She thought she was being subtle. She thought her fake romance had blinded me. In reality, I had loaded a dummy file onto that laptop hours ago, laced with a hidden tracking signal. When she finished, she unplugged the drive, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ethan." She hurried out of the room. I opened my eyes immediately, pulled out my phone, and called my security chief, Marcus. "Is she moving?" I asked. "Yes, boss," Marcus replied through the earpiece. "She's heading down to the parking garage. Julian's private car is waiting around the corner." "Good. Keep your distance but follow them," I said. "It's time to put stage 2 into motion." I grabbed my coat and rushed down to my own sports car. I needed to make sure I was in position. As I pulled out onto the rain-slicked highway, a black SUV suddenly accelerated from an alleyway, barreling straight toward my driver's side door. Julian's team wasn't just stealing the keys, they wanted to eliminate the real heir permanently. Crash. Metal shrieked against metal. Glass shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces, and my world spun wildly out of control before plunging into pitch blackness. When my eyes finally fluttered open, the harsh fluorescent lights of an ICU room blinded me. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, accompanied by the steady rhythmic beep of a heart monitor. Chloe was sitting on a chair right beside my bed, clutching a handkerchief. Julian stood near the window, looking at his phone with a faint, satisfied smirk. They thought I was broken. They thought they had secured my fortune and my life's work in one single bloody evening. Chloe noticed my movement and instantly leaned over the bed, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ethan. Oh, thank God you're awake. I was so scared. The doctor said the crash was terrible." Julian walked over, putting a fake, comforting hand on her shoulder. "Take it easy, Chloe. You just woke up. Ethan, can you hear us? Do you know where you are?" I stared at them. I let my eyes dilate, keeping my face completely blank. I looked straight into Chloe's eyes, then shifted my gaze to Julian, showing no emotion, no recognition, and no warmth. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice raspy and weak. Chloe froze instantly. Her tearful expression hardened into pure shock. What did you say?" "I asked who you are," I repeated, clutching my head in manufactured agony, letting a dry groan escape my throat. "Where am I? Who am I? Why are you holding my hand?" Julian snapped his head toward me, his face turning pale. "Ethan, stop messing around. Do you know who I am?" I don't know anyone," I whispered, pulling my hand away from Chloe's grip. "I don't remember anything." The room fell dead silent. I watched Chloe's eyes widen in absolute horror as the reality hit her. Without my active biometrics and live passcodes, which I had never written down, the stolen decryption keys were totally useless. By resetting my identity, I had just wiped out their entire victory in a single second. The private hospital room felt quiet, but the air was thick with tension. Julian stood near the window, frantically typing on his phone. His face was pale. Chloe sat on the sofa across from my bed, her hands trembling as she held an encrypted hard drive in her lap. "It won't open, Julian," Chloe hissed in a hushed, desperate voice, glancing over at me to make sure I wasn't listening. "The system is demanding a rolling biometric scan and a daily voice verification key. The files are completely locked." Julian stormed over to her, his voice barely a whispered snarl. "What do you mean locked? You said you copied the master decryption files from his laptop." "I did." Chloe defended herself, her voice cracking. "But Ethan built a two-factor daily override into the core architecture. Without his live authentication every 24 hours, the drive self-encrypts. The stolen data is completely useless trash." I lay in bed, staring blankly at the ceiling, pretending to be utterly lost in my own mind. "Excuse me?" I asked, making my voice sound high and uncertain. "Are you two talking to me? Do I work for you?" Julian whirled around, his eyes wild with anger. "Ethan, shut up for a second. Try to remember. What is the vocal passkey for the Vance security servers?" Julian stopped shouting at him. Chloe pulled him back. "He has severe amnesia. The doctors said pushing him could cause permanent neurological damage." "I don't care about his brain." Julian spat, rubbing his forehead in sheer panic. "I invested $10 million of private offshore funds into this launch. If we don't deliver the decryption source code to the board by Friday, the investors will pull out and bankrupt me." I turned my head away, hiding the small smirk pulling at the corners of my lips. My plan was working better than I had hoped. 2 days later, the doctors discharged me under the care of my personal security team. They brought me back to my luxury penthouse overlooking the city. The moment the heavy oak doors shut and the blinds rolled down, the blank look faded from my face. Marcus Reed stepped out from the private study, holding a secure laptop and 2 coffee mugs. "Clean sweep on the apartment, boss," Marcus said, handing me a mug. "No listening devices found. You played them like a violin at the hospital." "Did Chloe fall for it completely?" I asked, taking a sip of the dark roast. "Completely," Marcus replied, leaning against the kitchen island. "She reported back to Julian that your mind is a complete blank. She thinks you don't even remember your own name, let alone the access codes." "And Julian's financial backing?" "In absolute freefall," Marcus chuckled, pulling up a live financial chart on his screen. "He promised the syndicate full access to your encryption key by noon today. Since he couldn't bypass the biometric firewall, his international backers pulled their funding an hour ago. He just lost $12 million in equity." "He's bleeding money," I said, looking out the floor-to-ceiling glass window. "He thought stealing my work would make him the permanent heir to Vance Enterprises. Now he's realizing he's nothing without me." "It gets worse for his team," Marcus added, pointing out the window toward the street below. "Look down there." I stepped closer to the glass. Parked across the street was Julian's dark limousine. The rear door flew open and Chloe was shoved violently out onto the curb. Her leather handbag spilled its contents across the sidewalk as Julian stepped out after her, screaming in broad daylight. "You're fired, Chloe." Julian's voice echoed faintly up the street as I cracked the terrace window. "You promised me those keys. You were supposed to handle him." "I did my job, Julian." Chloe sobbed, picking up her scattered papers from the pavement. "It's not my fault he crashed his car and lost his memory. You ruined everything by ordering that crash. Get out of my sight." Julian roared, slamming the limousine door and speeding away, leaving her crying in the rain. I watched her collapse onto her knees on the cold concrete. There was no pity in my heart. She had pretended to love me, targeted my life's work, and helped set me up for a fatal accident. Seeing her discarded so ruthlessly by the man she traded her integrity for was pure poetic justice. "She's finished," Marcus noted, standing beside me. Julian cut her off completely. "She won't be able to get a job in this city ever again." "Chloe was just the first wave, Marcus," I said softly, stepping back inside and sliding the glass door shut. "Julian is desperate now. He knows he can't break my code, so he's going to switch tactics." "What do you think he'll do next?" Marcus asked, his expression growing serious. "He knows he can't steal my tech anymore," I replied, looking at my reflection in the dark glass. "So he'll try to destroy my character. He'll send someone I actually trust. Someone from my past. Prepare the surveillance team. The game has just reset. The front doorbell chimed through my penthouse. I adjusted my posture, putting on a faint, vacant expression before answering. Standing on the porch was Sienna Miller, holding a small box of old photographs. Her soft hazel eyes filled with tears the moment she looked at me. "Ethan," she whispered, stepping forward. "Oh, Ethan. Do you really not remember me?" I blinked, tilting my head with staged confusion. I'm sorry. Should I know you?" "It's me, Sienna," she sobbed, pressing a hand to her chest. "We grew up together. Your mother and mine were best friends. When I heard about your accident and the amnesia, I couldn't just sit back. I brought some old memories to help you." "Sienna," I repeated slowly, letting the name drag out. "Come in, please." She walked into the living room, setting the box on the glass coffee table. She pulled out a framed photo of us from high school. "Look at this," she said gently, guiding my hand to the glass. "You promised me back then that no matter what happened with Vance Enterprises, we'd always protect each other." "Did I?" I asked, looking down at the picture. My heart felt cold. Sienna had been like a sister to me. But Marcus had already intercepted her private calls with Julian last night. She wasn't here out of love. Julian had promised to clear her family's crippling debts if she planted illegal evidence inside my penthouse. "Yes, you did," Sienna said, wiping her eyes. She reached into her large tote bag while my back was turned toward the kitchen counter. "Ethan, could you get me a glass of water? My throat is so dry." "Of course," I replied smoothly. In the polished reflection of the stainless steel refrigerator, I watched her every move. She quickly crossed the room toward my open office door. She slipped inside, pulled out a thick leather binder from her bag and approached the wall safe. She already knew the combination. She had watched me open it years ago. She slid forged financial ledgers into the safe, along with offshore bank statements that falsely showed I had embezzled $50 million from Vance Enterprises. She stepped back out into the living room, adjusting her blouse just as I walked over with the glass of water. "Here you go, Sienna," I said, handing her the glass. She took a slow sip, her hands visibly shaking. "Ethan, I know things seem confusing right now, but everything I'm doing today, I'm doing it for our future. You have to believe me." "Our future?" I asked, looking directly into her eyes. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, loud, violent thuds echoed against the heavy oak front door. "Police, open up. We have a search warrant for Ethan Vance," a boisterous voice shouted from the hallway. Sienna gasped, dropping her glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, spilling water everywhere. "Oh my God. Ethan, what's happening?" I don't know," I said, backing away with a panicked expression. The front door burst open. 4 armed police officers strode into the apartment, led by a stern detective wearing a trench coat. Behind them stood Julian, a triumphant grin plastered across his face. "Detective, that's him," Julian said, pointing an accusing finger at me. "And that's his private safe in the office. We received an anonymous tip that he hid the stolen company funds right in there before his accident." The detective marched past me into the office, popping the safe door wide open. He pulled out the leather binder Sienna had just planted. "We have the ledgers," the detective declared, turning to face me. "Ethan Vance, you are under arrest for grand larceny and corporate embezzlement." Sienna covered her mouth, squeezing out fake, desperate tears. "Ethan, how could you do this? Did you lie to me about your memory loss just to hide your crimes?" Julian stepped forward, looking down at me like a victor. "It's over, Ethan. You can't hide behind a fake company title anymore. You're going to prison for the rest of your life." I looked at Julian. Then I looked at Sienna, whose eyes flickered with a brief flash of guilt. Suddenly, I let out a sharp, agonizing gasp. I grabbed both sides of my head with my hands, trembling violently as I fell to my knees right onto the hardwood floor. "Arg!" I screamed, clutching my temples as if a sudden hemorrhage were tearing through my brain. "Ethan!" Sienna yelled, startled by my sudden collapse. "What is he doing now?" Julian barked, stepping back nervously. "My head." I groaned, rolling onto my side, staring up at the ceiling with wide, terrified, empty eyes. I let my breathing become ragged and frantic. "Who are you people? Why are you in my house? Where am I?" The detective paused, holding the handcuffs open. "Sir, calm down. I don't know who you are." I shrieked, shrinking away from the officers in manufactured terror. "Where is my high school classroom? I was just taking my finals. Who is that man? Who is that woman? Help me." Julian's smile instantly vanished, replaced by sheer horror. No, no, not again. He's faking it. He's hyperventilating, the detective shouted, putting his handcuffs away and pulling out his radio. Dispatch, call an ambulance to the penthouse immediately. The suspect is having a severe neurological breakdown. I lay on the floor, weeping fake tears of pure terror, secretly watching Julian's face turn completely ash-white. By resetting my memory back even further, to my high school years, I had just rendered every single document from the last 5 years legally void for interrogation. Julian's second trap had just blown up in his face. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the brain monitor. Detective Miller leaned against the wall, crossing his arms tightly as my lead physician reviewed the fresh brain scan results. So you're telling me he can't even stand trial? Detective Miller asked, his tone laced with frustration. We found $50 million in fake ledger entries inside his safe. Detective, look at these scans, Dr. Harrison replied, tapping the lighted screen showing my head images. Ethan Vance is suffering from acute, severe retrograde amnesia triggered by physical trauma and extreme psychological distress. He literally believes he is 18 years old sitting in a high school classroom. Is it permanent? The detective pressed, glancing toward my bed. Right now he is legally incompetent, Dr. Harrison stated firmly. He cannot sign documents, he cannot manage assets, and he certainly cannot stand trial. Any statement you extract from him in this state is completely inadmissible in a court of law. I sat propped up against the pillows, staring blankly at my own hands like a confused teenager. Inside my mind, every thought was crystal clear. Once the detective reluctantly left the room, the heavy wooden door clicked shut. 2 minutes later, Marcus slipped inside, carrying an encrypted tablet under his dark jacket. He double-checked the hallway before turning to me. The police locked down the embezzlement charges, boss, Marcus said quietly, pulling up a secure file. Your medical diagnosis completely froze the prosecutor's office. They can't move forward. What about Sienna? I asked, dropping my confused act instantly as my voice turned cold and sharp. Her entire testimony collapsed during the initial deposition this morning, Marcus chuckled softly. Our legal team pointed out 3 massive contradictions in her statement. She claimed she didn't know your safe combination, yet police forensically proved her fingerprints were all over the digital keypad before they even arrived. She was sloppy, I said, taking the tablet from his hands. Julian pushed her too hard because he was desperate. It gets better, Marcus pointed to the screen. I personally leaked the recorded phone calls between Sienna and Julian to every major news outlet 20 minutes ago. Listen to this clip. He tapped the screen. Sienna's voice echoed clearly through the small speaker. Julian, I planted the forged ledgers in Ethan's safe just like you asked. Now wire the $5 million to pay off my family's debts before the police raid his penthouse. The media is having a field day, Marcus grinned. Sienna's reputation is destroyed. The police just issued a warrant for her arrest for perjury and filing a false report. And Julian? I asked, scrolling through the breaking news headlines blowing up across financial channels. How is my beloved adopted brother taking the news? He's panicking, Marcus replied, leaning in closer. He invested his last remaining liquid capital to pay off Sienna and bribe those offshore auditors. Now that the media knows he framed you, the board of directors called an emergency meeting to strip him of his executive proxy. He realizes he's fighting a ghost, I said, handing the tablet back to Marcus. Every time he tries to corner me with a trap, I reset the chessboard. He can't sue a man who doesn't remember his own name, and he can't steal assets from a target he can't legally pin down. He's bleeding money and credibility, Ethan, Marcus warned. A desperate rat in a corner is the most dangerous kind. Where is he right now? He just left the Vance Enterprises building after the board froze his corporate accounts, Marcus said, checking his secure phone tracking app. He took a private call from Haley Cross 5 minutes ago. Do you remember her? Haley Cross, I repeated, my jaw tightening slightly. Julian's ultimate weapon. The most ruthless reputation assassin on Wall Street. If he's calling her, he's given up on the legal route. What's the play? Marcus asked, his posture stiffening. If Haley gets involved, she won't just try to steal your money or plant documents. She destroys lives publicly through mass media and character assassination. Let him call her, I said, a dark smile spreading across my face as I lay back against the hospital pillows. Julian is throwing all his remaining resources into one final, explosive play. He thinks he can drag my name through the mud and force the board to declare me unfit forever. Are you going to keep playing the helpless amnesia victim? Marcus asked. For now, yes, I answered, looking straight at my security chief. Let Haley think I'm a broken, mindless child. Let Julian spend every last dollar he has left on this attack. When he thinks he's finally about to deliver the killing blow, I will wake up and destroy him. The heavy rain pounded against the reinforced glass windows of my private estate. I stood near the marble fireplace, holding a cup of hot tea. I knew Julian was reaching his breaking point, but I didn't expect him to drop all pretenses so quickly. The front doors suddenly splintered open with a deafening crash. 4 masked men dressed in dark tactical gear burst into the foyer, brandishing silenced pistols. Behind them walked Julian, his hair messy, his designer suit rumpled, and his eyes wildly unhinged. No more games, Ethan. Julian roared, stepping past his hired mercenaries. No more honey traps, no more fake amnesia, and no more legal loopholes. I set my teacup down on the mantel, keeping my expression completely passive. Julian? Why are you breaking into my house with armed men? Shut up, he screamed, pulling a thick stack of legal transfer documents from his jacket pocket and throwing them onto the coffee table. You are going to sign over your entire inheritance, your stock rights, and your master tech patents to me right now. And if I refuse? I asked calmly, looking at the leader of the mercenaries. If you refuse, they break your knees one by one until you sign, Julian sneered, stepping closer. And once you sign, they make it look like a tragic home invasion robbery gone wrong. You won't survive the night, brother. The mercenary commander stepped forward, pressing the cold steel barrel of his silenced pistol directly against my forehead. You heard him, kid. Grab the pen and sign, or this gets very painful. Instead of flinching or showing fear, I let my eyes roll back slightly. I slouched my shoulders and let out an erratic, nervous laugh, clutching my head with both hands. Wait, where am I? I babbled, making my voice tremor with frantic confusion. Mom? Is that you? Why are these men wearing masks inside our kitchen? Did I miss the school bus again? Julian froze, his jaw dropping in utter disbelief. What? No. Stop doing that. You can't be having another amnesia episode right now. Please don't shoot me. I shrieked, stumbling backward into a side table and intentionally knocking over a heavy bronze statue. The crash echoed loudly through the estate. I haven't finished my middle school homework. Who are you people? Grab him. Julian yelled at the mercenaries, visibly flustered by my erratic movements. Hold him down and force his thumb onto the biometric ink pad. Don't let him squirm. The mercenary leader scoffed in frustration, grabbing my collar. Is this guy insane? He thinks he's a middle schooler. I don't care what he thinks. Julian shouted, waving the papers wildly. Just pin his arm to the table. While the 4 mercenaries stepped in close, completely distracted by my hysterical, confused act, my fallen bronze statue had served its true purpose. It was the acoustic trigger signal for Marcus. The large glass ceiling skylight exploded inward in a shower of glittering shards. Heavy tactical ropes dropped down instantly as Marcus and 6 heavily armed security operatives descended into the foyer like shadows. Flashbang. Marcus shouted from above. A blinding white light and a thunderous bang detonated in the center of the room. The mercenaries screamed, clutching their eyes and ears as they dropped their weapons in total disorientation. Within 5 seconds, Marcus's team tackled all 4 mercenaries to the floor, disarming them and securing their wrists in tight plastic zip ties. Marcus stepped forward, lowering his tactical rifle, his face stern. Estate is secure, boss. I instantly straightened my posture, smoothed down my suit jacket, and wiped the fake panic completely from my face. My voice turned razor sharp. Excellent timing, Marcus. Julian backed away toward the front door, staring at me as if he had just seen a ghost. His face turned ghostly pale, his hands shaking uncontrollably as he dropped his forged transfer papers to the floor. You were acting. Julian stammered, his voice cracking in sheer terror. You were pretending the whole time. Did you really think 4 cheap hired guns could force my hand in my own home, Julian? I asked, stepping over the disarmed mercenaries and approaching him slowly. Every move you make is predictable. You just committed armed robbery, attempted extortion, and conspiracy to murder. No. This isn't over. Julian shrieked, stumbling backward into the rain outside. I still have Haley. She's going to ruin you at the gala tomorrow. She's going to burn your name to the ground. Let her try, I said softly as Marcus closed the heavy oak doors, locking Julian out in the cold storm. The grand ballroom of the Grand Regent Hotel buzzed with high society chatter, flashing camera lights, and clinking champagne flutes. The annual Vance Enterprises Gala was in full swing, and every major news outlet in the country had cameras positioned along the stage. I stood in the shadowed wings near the stage curtains watching the crowd. Beside me, Marcus checked his tactical earbud and nodded. "Haley Cross just took the stage podium, boss," Marcus whispered. "Julian is standing right behind her in the front row, grinning like he's already won." I adjusted my bow tie and kept my posture relaxed. Let her run her mouth. Let her dig their grave as deep as it can go. Out on the stage, Haley Cross adjusted the microphone. She wore an elegant red dress, but her face was painted with practiced sorrow. She squeezed out tears on command as the bright television lights locked onto her. "Members of the board, distinguished guests and members of the press," Haley began, her voice quivering with dramatic grief. "I cannot remain silent any longer. I stand here tonight to expose the real Ethan Vance." The entire ballroom fell dead silent. Reporters surged forward, lifting their micro-recorders and aiming lenses. "Ethan Vance is not a victim of amnesia," Haley cried out, pointing a trembling finger toward the crowd. "He is a ruthless criminal. 3 weeks ago, inside his private office, Ethan physically assaulted me when I threatened to expose his treason. He has been secretly selling our company's core technological patents to foreign crime syndicates." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. Photographers snapped dozens of flash photos in rapid succession. Julian stepped up onto the stage right beside her, wearing a look of grave, solemn authority. He took the microphone from her hands, shaking his head with manufactured disappointment. "As the proxy head of Vance Enterprises, I am deeply ashamed," Julian announced into the microphone, his voice booming over the speakers. "My adoptive brother's mind has completely collapsed into madness and crime. Because of his violent actions and his total mental incompetence, I am officially stepping in tonight to assume permanent control of Vance Enterprises and all its subsidiary assets." The room erupted into absolute chaos. Shareholders began shouting, reporters screamed questions, and board members looked around in complete panic. Julian raised his hands, basking in what he believed was his ultimate victory. I stepped out from behind the velvet stage curtains. "I wouldn't sign those executive proxy papers just yet, Julian," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the noise. The entire ballroom froze. Julian whirled around, his eyes widening in shock as I strolled calmly toward the center of the stage. Haley took an anxious step backward, clutching her designer purse. "Ethan?" Julian stuttered, recovering his composure with a forced sneer. "What are you doing here? You don't even know where you are. You're a mentally broken invalid who lost his memory." I walked straight up to Haley Cross. I looked her up and down with a cool, unbothered expression. "I don't know who you are, Haley," I said softly, my voice echoing clearly through the podium microphone. "But my security cameras certainly do." Haley's face instantly drained of all color. What are you talking about?" "Marcus, run the feed," I ordered calmly into my lapel mic. Directly behind the podium, the massive 40-foot projector screen flickered to life. The audio blasted through the ballroom's surround sound system. It was a crystal-clear, high-definition video recording taken inside Julian's private office just 4 days ago. On the screen, Julian, Haley, Chloe, and Sienna were all gathered around a glass table, drinking whiskey and laughing hysterically. Once Haley accuses him of assault on live TV, the board will have no choice, Julian's recorded voice echoed loudly across the ballroom. "Ethan's fake amnesia won't save him this time. We'll split his inheritance 4 ways and no one will ever know we staged his car crash." "He's so gullible," Haley's recorded voice laughed back on screen. "He actually thinks people care about him. By tomorrow night, I'll have him ruined forever." The video kept playing, showing explicit floor plans, forged documents, and direct bank transfers from Julian's offshore accounts straight to Haley's private shell company. The entire gala went dead quiet. Then total uproar broke out. Haley dropped her purse, shaking uncontrollably as she backed away from the screen. Julian stood frozen at the podium, his mouth hanging open in sheer horror as every single camera in the room swung away from Haley and locked directly onto his terrified face. I leaned into the microphone, looking straight at Julian. "Game over, brother." The ballroom was absolute chaos. Flashing cameras, shouting reporters, and gasping board members filled the grand space as the broadcast evidence continued to play behind us. The double doors at the back of the hall slammed open. A squad of uniformed federal agents and plainclothes detectives marched down the central aisle, led by Detective Miller. "Julian Vance. Haley Cross." Detective Miller's voice echoed through his megaphone over the roaring crowd. "Stay where you are. Armed federal agents have surrounded this entire building. Haley panicked instantly, spinning around to run toward the back exit. 2 female federal agents cut off her path, forcing her hands behind her back and clicking steel handcuffs tightly around her wrists. "Get your hands off me!" Haley screamed, thrashing wildly. "I was just paid to speak. It was all Julian's idea. He forced me to lie." "Save it for the grand jury, Miss Cross," Detective Miller snapped, handing her off to his officers. Julian backed into the corner of the stage like a cornered animal, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Detective Miller stepped up onto the riser, grabbing Julian's arm firmly and forcing him down onto his knees. "Julian Vance, you are under arrest for grand corporate fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder, and armed home invasion," Detective Miller stated, clicking metal cuffs around Julian's wrists. "No. This is a setup." Julian shrieked, looking up at the flashing camera lenses in utter humiliation. "Ethan is insane. He's a brain-damaged invalid. You can't trust anything he shows you." "The video feed came directly from your secure server, Julian," Detective Miller growled, pulling him up by his collar. "We already arrested Chloe Bennett and Sienna Miller 10 minutes ago based on this exact warrant. They're both singing like birds down at federal headquarters." The agents began dragging Julian toward the stage stairs. As he passed me, he thrashed against their grip, stopping right in front of where I stood calmly near the podium. "How?" Julian screamed into my face, tears of rage and desperation streaming down his cheeks. "How did you do this? I took your money, I took your corporate keys, I sent 3 women to destroy you, and I sent armed men to your home. You didn't even know who you were." I stepped closer to him, keeping my face completely calm while the reporters filmed our every movement. I leaned down until my lips were right beside his ear, keeping my voice so low that only he could hear my words. "I never lost my memory, Julian," I whispered, letting out a soft, chilling breath. "Not after the car crash, not during the police raid, and not when your men broke into my house. I remembered every single detail, every single day." Julian froze. His eyes widened in pure, unadulterated horror as the terrifying truth finally crashed down on his mind. You faked it all?" he gasped, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "Every single reset. Every time you thought you had me cornered, I reset the game and let you dig your own grave," I whispered back, locking eyes with him. "You destroyed yourself, brother. I just watched from the shadows. You monster." Julian shrieked, squirming violently as the federal agents yanked him away. "You're a demon, Ethan. You're a monster." The crowd watched in silent awe as the police dragged Julian, Haley, and their co-conspirators out through the glass doors, locking them inside police vans waiting on the street below. Marcus stepped up beside me on the stage, handing me a small remote. "The board of directors just held a rapid vote right here in the front row, boss. Unanimous decision. Julian's fake stock shares are canceled, and you are officially reinstated as the sole CEO and sole heir of Vance Enterprises." "Thank you, Marcus," I said softly, taking the remote. I looked out at the massive ballroom. The press lights flashed, the board members applauded, and the room cheered for the return of the true heir. I turned off the large video screen behind me. Chloe was broke, Sienna was facing trial, Haley's career was completely finished, and Julian was going away to federal prison for the rest of his life. They had used every trick, every lie, and every weapon to try and steal my life away from me. In the end, I didn't need to fire a single shot or break a single law. The ultimate revenge was simply stepping back, acting like a fool, and letting my enemies destroy themselves while I held all the cards. I stood alone at the very top of Vance Enterprises, ready to rule.